The Ghost in Room 428, Ohio University. Ohio University has its fair share of ghost stories, but nothing quite compares to Wilson Hall. People say it's cursed, haunted, whatever you want to call it, but one room was so disturbing that the university had no choice but to seal it off forever. That room was 428. A few years ago, I was visiting a friend who lived in Wilson Hall. We were hanging out, swapping ghost stories, when he told me about the room, the one no one was allowed to enter. It was bolted shut. The door frame had been reinforced. No students were assigned to it, and the university refused to talk about why. Naturally, I was intrigued. That's when he told me people who lived in that room reported things that should not have been possible. Objects flying across the room, whispers in the middle of the night, shadowy figures in the corners. And then there was the girl. In the 1970s, a student who was obsessed with the occult lived in room 428. She was found dead, no explanation, no cause of death. Some say she took her own life. Others believe something in that room took her. I laughed it off, said it was just a story, but my friend, he wasn't laughing. He told me if I didn't believe it, I should spend the night in there. I should have walked away, I should have ignored the dare, but I didn't. I had to see for myself. Getting in was easier than expected. A little research, a few questions asked in the right places, and I learned that the janitor still had a spare key. That night, when the halls were empty, I waited until the custodian was distracted, and I took it. I stood outside, room 428, heart-pounding keys, trembling in my hands. For a second I thought I heard whispering on the other side of the door, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was wrong. It wasn't just old and abandoned. It felt off. The air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't explain. The walls were bare, but I swore I could see faint smudges, like something had been wiped away. I sat on the floor, flashlight in hand, and waited. Nothing happened. An hour passed, then two. I started to feel foolish. Maybe my friend was just messing with me. And then the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the air. I heard a sound behind me, a soft tap, 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 like fingernails against wood. I spun around. Nothing. I turned back and the closet door was open. I hadn't touched it. The air felt even heavier now, pressing against my chest. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but I was frozen, staring at that open closet, afraid to look inside. Then I heard it. A whisper. A voice so quiet, so close, it felt like it was right against my ear. Get out. Every hair on my body stood up. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding. But as I turned toward the door, I saw it. A reflection in the dusty mirror on the wall. Not mine. A hooded figure with a pale face and hollow eyes. It was standing right behind me. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted out of room 428, slamming the door behind me. I didn't stop running until I was outside the dorm, gasping for air. The next day I went back. Not inside, never again, but just to check. The door, it was sealed, as if it had never been opened. I asked around. The janitor, he swore no keys were missing. My friend, he laughed and told me it was impossible. I couldn't have gotten in, because room 428 had been permanently locked for decades. But I know what I saw, and I know I was not alone in that room. So, if you ever find yourself in Wilson Hall and you hear a whisper behind you, don't turn around. And whatever you do, don't go into room 428. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for spine-chilling horror content. The Haunting of Smith Hall, Western Kentucky University. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up feeling uneasy. The room was silent, but something felt wrong. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned onto my side and nearly screamed. The room was dark, the kind of darkness that feels almost tangible, wrapping around you like a suffocating blanket. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. There at the foot of my bed sat a figure. It was barely visible in the dim light, but its presence was undeniable, a shadow that seemed to absorb the darkness around it. A woman, Her long dark hair fell over her pale face, her head tilted down. She looked like something out of a nightmare, a ghostly apparition that had stepped out of the shadows and into my room. She wasn't moving, but I could feel her watching me. Her eyes, barely visible through the curtain of hair, seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I couldn't breathe. My body refused to move. It was as if I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but it was impossible. This couldn't be real. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I was trapped, caught in the gaze of this terrifying figure. My heart raced faster, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps, but I couldn't. Then she did move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to shift. The air grew colder, and a chill ran down my spine. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted to the spot, helpless and terrified. Slowly, her head lifted, as if weighed down by an invisible burden. The room was cloaked in shadows, and the air felt thick with an unspoken tension. And I saw her eyes, dark, empty, lifeless. They seemed to pierce through the darkness, holding a story of untold sorrow and despair. A whisper, so faint yet so clear, slid into my ears. Help me. It was a plea, a desperate cry that sent shivers down my spine. The air turned ice cold. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. Each exhale formed a mist, a visible testament to the sudden drop in temperature. I clenched my eyes shut, praying it was just a dream. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the silence. Seconds passed, felt like hours. When I finally opened them, she was gone. The room was empty, but the chill lingered, and the whisper echoed in my mind. Was it real, or just a figment of my imagination? The question haunted me, leaving me with an uneasy feeling that I couldn't shake off. But the bed where she had sat was still freezing. I couldn't sleep after that. The next day I told my roommate. She turned pale. "You saw her too," she whispered. That's when I learned about Sarah, the student who supposedly jumped from the top floor years ago. Some say she was pushed, others say she leaped in despair over a broken heart. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: she never left. Over the weeks, more strange things happened. My things would disappear and reappear in odd places. The sound of soft crying would wake me up in the middle of the night, and sometimes I'd catch glimpses of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow, a figure, watching. Then came the night I'll never forget. I was alone studying late when the temperature dropped. My breath turned to mist. My door creaked open, slowly. My stomach turned to ice. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling. Then, the whisper came again. "Help me." It was faint, almost like a breath against my ear, sending chills down my spine. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The voice was desperate, pleading, and it echoed in the silence of the hallway. The lights flickered. My door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. I felt trapped, the air growing colder with each passing second. The room seemed to close in on me, the shadows dancing menacingly, as if they were alive. And in the reflection of my dark laptop screen, I saw her standing behind me. Her eyes were hollow, her face twisted in sorrow. She reached out, her fingers almost touching my shoulder. I could feel her cold presence, a shiver running down my spine. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The night was eerily quiet. The only sound was my ragged breathing. I looked back, half expecting to see her following me, but there was nothing, just the darkness and the lingering fear that she was still there, watching. I didn't sleep in that room again. By the end of the semester, I transferred dorms, but even now, I can still feel her, like she never really left me. Some say ghosts linger because they have unfinished business. If that's true, then Sarah is still waiting. And if you ever stay in Smith Hall, she might just visit you next. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for spine-chilling horror content. The Haunting of Smith Hall, Western Kentucky University. It started with the little things. My door would rattle late at night, like someone was trying to get in. I'd wake up to tapping sounds from inside the walls, steady, deliberate. My roommate laughed it off, saying it was just the old pipes. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, one night, I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. There was someone in my room, or at least I thought there was. A tall, dark figure stood at the foot of my bed, motionless, like a statue carved from the shadows themselves. My body locked in place, frozen with fear, unable to move a muscle. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could see no facial features, no details, just a silhouette looming over me, menacing and silent. I wanted to scream, to move, but I couldn't. It was as if an invisible force held me down. My breath hitched in my throat as I watched it, my eyes wide with terror. Then, it took a step forward, slow and deliberate, as if savoring my fear. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to be a dream, praying for it to disappear. When I opened them, it was gone. The room was empty, but the fear lingered, haunting me. That was only the beginning. The first night was eerie, but manageable. I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Every night after that, the presence grew stronger. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, feeding off my fear. The knocking in the walls turned into pounding. It was relentless, echoing through the silence of the night. The air in my room felt thick, suffocating. Breathing became a struggle, as if the very atmosphere was closing in on me. I saw shadows darting across my ceiling. They moved with a purpose, as if they were searching for something, or someone. But the worst was the whispering. It was incessant, a constant murmur that made my skin crawl. Soft, right by my ear, but impossible to understand. The words were foreign, yet filled with a sinister intent. One night, I woke up to my room shaking. It was violent, as if an unseen force was trying to throw me out. At first, I thought it was an earthquake, but then I felt it. A presence, cold and malevolent. Fingers, cold, unseen, gripping my ankle, slowly pulling. The sensation was terrifying, paralyzing me with fear. I kicked, scrambled, turned on the light. Nothing. The room was empty, but the feeling of being watched remained. But I knew I wasn't alone. The presence was there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then one night, my roommate saw it too. He woke up screaming. When I turned to him, his eyes were wide, filled with terror. He pointed toward the door. I saw it, he whispered. It was standing there, watching us. That was it. We had to get out. We requested a room transfer the next day. The university dismissed our claims, said we were imagining things. But I know what I saw, and I know we weren't the only ones. Years later, I met another former resident of Converse Hall. We exchanged stories, and it was like looking into a mirror of my own past. When I mentioned my experience, he turned pale, his eyes wide with recognition and fear. His story, identical to mine, the same eerie occurrences, the same unsettling feelings, the shadow, the whispers, the inexplicable cold that would seep into our bones, the feeling of something watching, always there just out of sight. Some say it's just superstition, a trick of the mind. Others say it's the spirit of the student who died there years ago, trapped, searching, never at peace, a restless soul wandering the halls. All I know is I left Converse Hall. I couldn't stay there any longer. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still feel it, the presence, the weight of those memories haunting me. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for spine-chilling horror content.